All right, cool. All right, welcome. It is Monday, February 26, 2018. It's beautiful outside in Chicago. Today it's surprisingly beautiful. Today, it's Kirby Atwell is here. Kirby is the COO of Bunker Labs, also a fellow entrepreneur and former Army man.
No Scott Hardesty today.
No Scott Hardesty today.
No protein powders to peddle today.
Sorry. Today we have Dan Savage, who runs, he's the head of the Veterans Program at LinkedIn. He's going to be coming on to talk about some things that LinkedIn can do for military veterans startups, as well as people who are interested in professional services and that kind of stuff anyways, or, you know what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Let's see. So Dan's out in San Francisco. So in the spirit of LinkedIn and transition and hiring and jobs and business and stuff, I wanted to ask a riddle that's like I read this in like a dumb article, but it was like these are common common interview questions. They're like riddles. Ooh, so here's the riddle.
Just thinking today.
And Dan, I want to see if you've ever heard this one before, so we'll check in with you in a minute. Okay, so you have 3 boxes. One of them has apples in it, one of them has oranges in it, and the third has apples and oranges in it. They're all mislabeled. Okay, so they're all mislabeled. You can reach into a box and grab, out of any box, like blindfolded, reach and grab one fruit, I guess, out of any of the boxes. How can you accurately label all 3 boxes by reaching in and grabbing just one fruit? So I think that was like a Google question. I'm going to post it in the app. I'll give the audience, 20, 30 minutes to figure this out? And
Sure.
No. I'll tell you all the answer in a little bit, I promise. But
you can check the app.
Exactly, or you can check the app in a little bit too. So Dan Savage is joining us today. It's going to be a great show. Please ask questions. If you have any questions for how LinkedIn can be a service to veterans, please ask in the comments below, and we'll do our best to ask Dan all of those questions. Thank you very much. Let's do it. It's the breakdown. All right. So,
Dan. Let's jump right in, man. It's good to see you. We are West Point classmates. It's been a long time. Class 2005, keeping freedom alive. Yeah. But it's good to run across classmates. You know, we both served in the Army after we graduated. But it's been a while since 2005. So tell me a little bit about what you did in the Army and your transition to LinkedIn.
Yeah, so also great to see you. I think, one of the things we always tell vets when they're thinking about what their next step is going to be is like do the work and find out who's working at the company you want to work for, because you never know when you're going to run back into someone you served with or you went to school with. So
exactly.
So I graduated in 2005. I was an infantry officer, so started, my first year was at Fort Benning doing all the, airborne school, ranger school, all that, the typical stuff. And then I was stationed out in Germany. So I spent a year in Germany training with the Stryker Brigade that's out there, and then brought our guys to Baghdad for about 15 months. Went back to Germany, and then I spent my last year in the Army at what's known as ARCENT, Army Central Command, which at the time, basically, I was doing PowerPoint slides for a general, which was a very exciting way to close out my military service.
Nice.
But yeah, after I got out of the Army, I knew I wanted to keep doing good in some way, but I didn't really quite know how. So I went and got a master's degree in public policy, and that's kind of what led me into being interested in the veteran services space. I started studying sort of what exactly is it that exists out there to support us, and how well coordinated or not it is, and how can I make a difference in sort of shaping that ecosystem.
Cool. So tell me about your transition to LinkedIn. How did that come about?
So let me think. I started off with this thing called the Institute for Veterans and Military Families. I know you guys are a partner of theirs, but a lot of folks out there aren't necessarily aware. They think of Syracuse University. They've got a couple programs that are, really well known. But I spent 4 years working at IVMF, and I knew, just like any job, I think after a while you sort of know when it's time to move on to something new and try something else on. And ironically enough, at the time I was running a veterans employment program around the country where, I was still working for IVMF, but basically setting up these chapters at military bases around the country. And the guy who ended up hiring me at LinkedIn emailed my boss at IVMF and like 30 other people the job description and said, hey, can you, get this out to your network, and we'll try to find somebody that's going to be a good hire. my boss then passed it to me. I passed it along to all the folks that graduated from our program. But as it passed through my hands, I thought that looks like a pretty cool gig. And so I threw my hat in the ring and reached out to actually one of our classmates, Tom Pay, who was working at LinkedIn at the time, and he passed my resume off to the guy who was the hiring manager, and one thing led to another, and here I am.
Nice.
Been here about 2 years now.
Yeah, it's all about those connections. So tell me about what LinkedIn is doing for military veterans right now.
Yeah, for sure. So the one thing most folks know about us is the offer of a year of free premium. You can get that at veterans.linkedin.com. We upgraded about 70,000 people last year.
Wow.
But in addition to just sort of getting that one upgrade, if you go to that URL, there's a whole host of other resources. So we've built out, a lot of folks have heard of Lynda, but not LinkedIn Learning. It's essentially the same thing. So we have 3 LinkedIn Learning courses that are dedicated specifically to vets. There's now 2 LinkedIn Learning Pathways, which are basically curated playlists of content that's going to be relevant to our folks. One is essentially going from the service to getting a job. One's from the service to going into school. So that adds up to about 45 hours worth of online content for free. That's just the vet pathways, but there's like 11,000 courses in that library you get access to.
Wow.
And I'm always telling veteran entrepreneurs, that's like any gap that you can find in sort of your skill set or what you need for your business, there's going to be a course within that 11,000 that's going to be a good fit. And we actually have a LinkedIn Learning Pathway specifically called Become a Small Business Owner that'll walk you through everything from, building your business plan to, learning about finance and accounting to marketing, et cetera. So there's all that great content on LinkedIn Learning. We also have a Veteran Mentor Network, which is a group of about 120,000 professionals, both veteran and non-veteran, and it's a great place to sort of crowdsource questions, or if you're looking for a connection somewhere. I recently saw a guy saying, "Hey, I'm looking for a specific role at Amazon." He listed out the 2 places he was interested in working in. Within 8 hours, he had 2 recommendations to Amazon recruiters to speak to. So
Wow.
it's a pretty cool network that we've sort of cultivated here for vets to seek out resources.
Yeah. I don't think people understand how valuable that Lynda is. We get asked all the time, how do I become an entrepreneur? I'm working a 9 to 5. And it's nights and weekends. It's that side hustle. And Lynda is this platform where you want to learn anything. And you could just go to Lynda. It's free for a year. Take any course you want on any topic, and it's all there for you. So, I mean, it's an incredible offering that's out there.
So what most folks don't know about the difference is essentially we acquired Lynda.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn Learning basically leverages what we know about you from your profile to recommend courses to you. So if you've got premium, and if I were to look at your profile, for example, if I scroll down on the right, I'll see a little thing that says people with Kirby skills are taking these courses. So when you're setting a goal, if you want to be a business owner, you can look at someone else's profile that owns a business like yours, or if you want to get a job in the corporate world, whatever the case may be, just by checking out other people's profiles, we'll tee up for you the content that if you want that role someday, this is what you need to learn.
Awesome. That's
I
great.
feel like I don't use LinkedIn nearly enough as I should. It sounds like, yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me into a question I was curious about. So I'd love to hear your impression of the best way to use LinkedIn. Like what's the most effective way? Because I get every single day, I get somebody who I connect with because of a second or third order connection, and they send me this cold email saying, "Hey, dude, we connected, thanks, like, good to meet you, like, let's jump on a call so I can peddle my wares." Like, I mean, it's the same email, and at first I was like, yeah, that's great, like, send me what information on it, but now it's like I get inundated with it, and I feel like that's not an effective usage of LinkedIn. There's a much better way to use it. So can you explain like how you recommend a veteran entrepreneur use LinkedIn?
Yeah, so
All right.
I think we got
sort of usage as
Dan,
sales, right?
Dan, I'm sorry, the link cut out real quick. You say that again?
You guys are breaking up.
Yeah, you're
back?
breaking up too. I think you're back now.
All right. So I think it's touchy as an entrepreneur, to be able to do that sort of sales pitch in a way that feels genuine and authentic. I think, from an individual's perspective, really the power of LinkedIn is there's 540, I think now, million members around the world, right? And I can pretty much guarantee you that the right person that you're looking for with the right skill set or who works at the right company in the role that, again, as an entrepreneur that you're trying to sell to, I can guarantee you that in a matter of seconds, I can find that person for you, and you can do it yourself. You don't, it doesn't require me. But with our advanced search filters, and then especially we've been talking about being West Point classmates. If you go to any college or university that you graduated from, if you search for that school's page, there's a button that says "See Alumni." You click that, and it essentially creates what I refer to as kind of a toggle tool that shows you where they live, where they work, what they do, what they're skilled at, what they studied, how you're connected to them. And you can literally, in a matter of seconds, narrow down your school's alumni base to the 5 people you need to reach out to. I think that initial sort of outreach is always it's critically important to sort of word that correctly. So if you're going to ask to get on someone's calendar, it's always, I get these things all the time. I'm inundated with people saying, "Hey, can we talk tomorrow?" It's like, well, obviously the answer is no. If you are going to ask me, "Hey, do you have time in the next 2-3 weeks to talk?" Yeah, sure. Let's, find some time on my calendar and we can work something out. But it's really a matter of sort of being respectful of their position and their time, as well as kind of getting along, getting in their sort of your request for advice, or, you're asking them about your product, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But I think the best way to start that is really asking for advice, as opposed to, I'd like to, tell you about my product. Really, it could be, "Hey, I'm an entrepreneur. I'd love to learn more about, get your insight on what I'm trying to build."
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to get someone to respond to you that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you wouldn't do it in regular life, you probably shouldn't approach people that way on LinkedIn either.
Yeah.
No, exactly. That's a great point. Exactly. If you wouldn't come up to somebody and ask them something, don't do that online either. And from the sort of 4 categories that I think of when we talk about how an entrepreneur can use LinkedIn is what we call hire, market, sell, and learn. Right. So you can use LinkedIn to find the people that you want to hire to grow your business. You can use LinkedIn as a marketing tool through all of our sort of marketing solutions. Sell, as we just talked about, but we have a product called LinkedIn Sales Solutions that sort of helps you find the right people to sell to. And then learn is, we just talked about LinkedIn Learning. So It's much broader than I think a lot of folks just sort of think it's a place for your resume to go online.
Right. Do you have an example of the worst profile you have ever seen? And then also the other side, what are some examples that you recommend people do to make their profile better?
Yeah, so I think when you're building your profile, it's critical to think through the eyes of the person that's going to be looking at it, right? And so if you're interested in getting into an industry, you want to make sure you're portraying yourself as, looking like and using the language of, et cetera, the industry you want to go into. And a lot of vets sort of make the mistake of they're military. They want people to hire them, and their background is a military background. And I hesitate to use the guy's name, so you guys can go search him. But
is it me? Yeah.
There was a guy
profile?
that basically had, he had his bad veteran goatee. He had a backwards baseball cap on. He's got an American flag behind him.
Nice.
And let's just say, I won't use the actual phrase he used, but the guy referred to himself as something somewhat akin to G.I. Joe, right?
Nice.
And that was his name on LinkedIn.
Was he trying to get hired as a mercenary?
No, not at all. And so he reached out to me and he wanted to connect. And, typically if someone just connects with me, I don't have the time to, sort of give them all feedback on their profiles. But this was somewhat egregious. And so I reached back out to him. I said, "Hey, if your name is Paul Jones, maybe you can say if you're really attached to this G.I. Joe thing, you can be Paul G.I. Joe Jones or something." And he was like, "Yeah, thanks for the feedback." And I went back and I looked at his profile a week later, and he changed it to, and again, this is not the right phrase, but he changed it to basically G.I. Paul Jones Joe. And it was just
I'm not laughing.
No, man, you're completely missing the point here. I think, when you're choosing your profile picture, when you're choosing your headline, it should be something that when someone looks at your profile, they're going to be able to say, "Hey, I could imagine that person on my team."
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Before we jumped on live here, we were talking a little bit. You live in San Francisco. What's it like for the military community or the veteran community out there for vets, wanting to start a business out in San Francisco right now? Is it, do you feel like it's veteran friendly, or what's the climate like?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, there's a Bunker Labs chapter out here. I think they refer to themselves as the Silicon Valley Bunker Labs chapter.
Justine, yeah.
Bay Area.
Yep, Justine Evers runs that. I think, there's a really robust community of veterans within the tech companies around here. We call it the Bay Area Veterans Coalition.
Okay.
So for the folks who already are working at a company, there's a really large group of folks that are trying to help each other out. For veteran entrepreneurs, Vets in Tech is headquartered out of here. They do a lot of programming. I just mentioned the Bunker Labs program. There's a whole bunch of, actually, a couple of our classmates are out here starting their own businesses. So,
Cool.
there aren't any flashing signs saying veterans welcome, but if you know where to look, there's a ton of folks out here that are doing good work.
That's awesome.
It's amazing.
That's awesome. I just kind of was curious as to what the number one lesson you've learned. You've had kind of a story of transitioning over the past several years, and I'm sure you've felt different emotions, different feelings, different challenges at different points in that transition, and that's what I think a lot of veterans go through. And a lot of people who are on active duty who are transitioning soon are curious about, like, what advice would you give, about your transition?
Yeah, for sure. We could talk about that for a couple of hours, but I think the short summary, it wasn't easy. I think if you look at my LinkedIn profile, it probably looks like everything was like coherent, step by step. I did a lot of sort of wandering and not really knowing what was next for me. I moved. I got out, I was in Boston for school, and then I moved back to Chicago for like a month. And then I lived in Syracuse, New York for 2 years. I moved back to Boston. I lived in DC. Now I live here. The more flexible you are, the more open you are to new opportunities, the more open you are to trying something else, the better off you're going to be. And I think I've made a number of choices throughout the years that really were kind of leaps of faith. When I moved to Syracuse, I had no interest in living in Syracuse, Syracuse, New York, but it was at the time it was a small organization, but it was like a rocket ship, and it was like, you know what, I'm gonna go give that a try. And I think it's, I'm single, I don't own any property, I don't have a wife or kids or anything, so it's a little bit easier for me to kind of make those moves. But I think the more flexible you can be, the better. And I think it's also a matter of just being patient with yourself and with your transition. It really is going to try. It's going to take 2 or 3 tries before you really feel like you found your fit, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's just being a civilian. We're used to certainty in our military lives, and there ain't a whole lot of that going around out in the civilian world. You just kind of got to get comfortable with it.
Right. Yeah. Especially as an entrepreneur. No, that's great advice. Really appreciate that, and thank you again for the interview. I think we're moving on to hacks.
We got, real quick, a couple audience questions that I have to ask. All right, so first one, when can veteran training programs issue personalized digital certifications that have self-populated data on LinkedIn?
Wow.
So, I get a lot of questions about, that's a mouthful, but I get a lot of questions about, specifically sort of validating certifications, right? So if someone earned a certification within the military, will we be building something so that DoD can say, yes, that person got that? And really, we honestly don't believe that there's a problem of people falsifying information about themselves on our platform. Whereas others, you can create a profile with, all sorts of false information. With LinkedIn, there's some pretty strong professional repercussions for putting false things on your LinkedIn profile. So, we trust that if our user says they've got a project management professional certificate, we're not going to call the PMI to ask them if that's, if that's actually true.
Right.
Likewise, if you say you graduated from University of Chicago, we're not going to call University of Chicago and check up on that. So it's a valid question to ask, but I think we feel like the system's set up that people don't really, give us any false information.
All right.
Cool.
I'm adding University of Chicago to mine.
Yeah, might as well. I got a couple alma maters actually as of this afternoon. And another question: how many months out? Am I getting this right? So, how many months out should you start interviewing when you're transitioning out of the military? Like, when should you start preparing your LinkedIn profile? When should you start getting out there and going out to interview?
Yeah, so I would say if you're 12 months out and you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you're screwed. You got to get on that right off the bat and start using it to meet people. And really, I would say from 12 to 6 months is really just networking. And by networking, I really mean informational interviews.
Yeah.
We often, our community just does not know the wealth of options and opportunities out there that we've never even thought of before. And it takes a good 6 months to start having conversations with people to learn about what you might even want to be interested in. 6 to 3, you're probably like really going to be targeted on the company you want to work for or the job you want. And then 3 months out, like that's when companies are going to be starting to be willing to hire you.
Cool.
Nice.
All right. So thank you. We'll move on to hacks.
Yeah.
All right.
Pack it up.
So hacks are just tools and resources, things that can make your life more convenient or make your running a business more easy and efficient. And they're usually free. So I wanted to just ask you, what are some things that you use day to day or do, or what can LinkedIn provide that will make people's lives easier?
Yeah, we were joking just before this. I got to stay on brand and talk about a LinkedIn tool, but hold on one sec. The lights just went off.
Those motion
This is what
dispensers,
this is what you get when you work in Silicon Valley and everyone's worried about energy consumption. If you don't move enough in the room, the lights go off. Yeah, so on our app, basically we've got a tool for you to integrate your calendar with the LinkedIn app. And so basically I get little notifications that say, hey, you're about to meet with Kirby Atwell. Would you learn more about Kirby before your meeting? And so that's just a great way to sort of get to know people before you actually go sit down and talk to them. And I think a lot of folks out there think when you look at someone else's LinkedIn profile, you're stalking them or you're creeping on their profile.
Yeah.
They built their profile because they want people to know about their professional life. And if you walk into a meeting and you haven't read up on that person, that's a big mistake. And, like I meet with folks all the time, and I think within LinkedIn, it's just our culture. If you're going to meet with a senior exec, you're kind of expected to have reviewed their profile and know their background.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It's great advice.
That's awesome. Thank you. Kirby.
But that calendar tool is really useful.
Yeah.
I'm going to...
So my hack is actually a podcast. So our board president, Doug McCormick, recommended this podcast. It's called The Investors Podcast. And it's actually, so Doug's a West Pointer. It's another West Pointer that runs this podcast. He's a Harvard Business School grad, super smart guy. And their tagline is, "We study billionaires." So they study billionaires and they give advice and they practices of billionaires. And this morning, Doug actually was on the show, which I didn't know he was going on the show, but and he owns a private equity company. And so you hear private equity thrown around a lot. It's a huge asset class, a huge category, and he really breaks it down on this podcast, like what private equity is, all the different nuances of it and the facets of it, as much as he can in an hour. So it was a great summary, and I learned a ton. So I recommend checking it out.
That's very cool. How new is that?
The podcast has been around a while, but Doug's episode came out this morning, and I was just driving in and saw it. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, you should definitely check that out.
Yeah.
My hack is a book. It's a very, very short read, but it's a very important read, I think, and it's called Poke the Box by Seth Godin. Did you ever read that one?
I haven't read that one. I
It's
love
like
Seth, but
80 pages.
Really?
The book is like this big.
Poke the Box.
Poke the Box.
Interesting.
I'm not going to say anything more about it.
All right.
Just go and read it.
Go Google.
It's an important thing to read, I think, in your early stages as an entrepreneur. So
You could get in trouble if you Google that. I mean,
be careful
never
when
know.
you're Googling it.
You never know what could pop up.
Yes. So that's
Don't
my
Google
hack.
that at work.
Exactly. Yeah.
LinkedIn will frown on that.
So before we go, two things. One, that riddle I asked in the beginning. Did you ever figure it out?
Is it strawberries? Is it? No, I'm just
No.
kidding.
Good. Yeah. Strawberries is the answer.
I have no clue.
The answer is you go to the box that has both fruit in it, and because it's mislabeled, right? So you
Right.
reach into that box and you pull out the fruit,
Yeah.
and whatever you pull out it's mislabeled if it's the double. So if you pull out apples, you know that that's apples. So you start with that one,
Okay.
and then you know that. I'll get the answer and put it in the comments here. Maybe Silicon Valley is a
Download
little-
the app.
Just
It's the
download the
bottom-
app. I'll put it in the app.
Bottom line.
Download the app.
Download the app, and you'll know the answer.
Yeah. And the other thing is there's a number, we call it muster season here at Bunker Labs. There's a number of events, these very large scale, hundreds of people go to these things, keynote speakers, workshops, investor panels, you name it for early stage entrepreneurs. So that season starts next week in Washington, D.C., next Thursday. So I just want to throw out a couple of key dates for people here. I'll try to throw this in the comments too. But next Thursday, DC. Let's do April 26th, Austin, Texas. May 10th, Columbus, Ohio. May 16th, Nashville, Tennessee, and May 17th, Chicago. So these are like the premium of veteran networking events. So if you can get out to those locations, please do.
Ours is at Google here in Chicago.
Ours is at
headquarters, Chicago. So it's
No
gonna be
big deal. And next week, we're going to have Taylor Miner on here. He's a Marine Corps veteran. He's also a Shark Tank winner. His company is called Third Wave Water. It makes better water for your coffee. So join us next week. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Dan. And I will see you all next week.